If this was a Democratic hoax, then they would have released it when Joe Biden was president. This is a major, major problem for them. Donald Trump's got something that is impossible to sell, even for the greatest salesman. He just can't sell this.
So recently, Dave Smith exploded guns ablazing against the Trump administration and Trump himself for engaging in what is obviously a cover-up regarding the Epstein story. He gets into what this is doing to Trump's base, effectively causing a schism, and risking losing the entire MAGA coalition over it. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And before I'll get into a little bit here of Donald Trump's latest, which is, totally pathetic. But the final thing I'll say here, just on there might be, I've seen some people who have kind of had what I might consider like a little bit of a black pill take, where they'll say things like, it doesn't even matter. The elites don't even care if they can convince us anymore. They're just going to do it anyway. And they use as evidence, look, Trump's covering up the Epstein thing. Doesn't matter that all this is happening. But I think that is short-sighted. And I think it's a shallow understanding of what's going on here. I don't mean to be insulting to anyone who feels that way, but I'm just saying, I think all I'm saying is think it through a little bit more. Yes, it's true that they've lost the ability to control the narrative, and they're not just going to give up power because they've lost that. They're going to keep trying to pursue power. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a major, major problem for them. And I think it is. Let's just.
Yeah, I had to agree with him there, especially because of the fact that to exert political power, it actually takes a propaganda campaign where you win people over, not push them away. Yeah, they might maintain power, but they might also not be able to maintain a modicum of support for the rest of their agenda and the Trump administration agenda in general regarding immigration or tariffs or regulations and education. Everything else is at peril over this. So yeah, they can still hide it, and they might not care. But in some ways, I feel like they have to care still, even though we know this is a big political machine. It's the uniparty. Both sides are involved in the deep state. They still need support from their base to push forward what they want, and they can't get that when the inconsistencies are just too glaring, that this looks like too much of a cover-up, and I think you're seeing that.
First, pull up the tweet that Donald put, or the Truth Social, that he was getting ratioed on. And let me read it here. Okay, yes. The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again. Just like with the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, which the Dems swore had come from Russia. No, it came from Hunter Biden's bathroom. And even the Russia scam itself, a totally fake and made up story used in order to hide crooked Hillary's big loss in the 2016 presidential election. These scams and hoaxes are all the Democrats are good at. It's all they have.
Listen to this. He's pinning the whole Epstein story on the fact that it was a Democratic hoax on the same playing field as Russiagate and the Hunter laptop cover-up and all these other things. The Democrats were silent about this issue, essentially, under Trump's first administration and all throughout the Biden presidency, whereas they really tried to end Trump's political career entirely, if not his life, which they tried to do too, over the Russiagate scandal. It's all we heard about for years. It seemed like that they had the biggest political scandal on their hands since Watergate, and Trump was implicated. He was a Russian agent. This is what they sold us. They didn't sell us that plus Epstein. Plus there's a cover-up in the Epstein case, and Trump is implicated. They never even tried to sell that. And even if you think that some of them, were involved in that, I think the reasons are clear, is that their side's implicated too, and that's why they didn't make much of a stink about it then. And why, so many people are still seeking answers for it today.
Are no good at governing, no good at policy, and no good at picking winning candidates. Also, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters, very interesting line, my past supporters have bought into this bullshit hook, line, and sinker. Okay.
I can't believe this. that he would not only alienate the people that already have misgivings over how he's handling it, but also say it's only past supporters that are doing the Democrats' dirty work by mentioning this or bringing it up. And I'm sorry, polling data is showing at this point that it's not just some of the top influencers that have a problem with this. It's not just Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Matt Walsh and Steve Bannon and Alex Jones. It's like 83% of the polled electorate that I've seen so far. This is a sweeping issue, and it's really actually throwing some shade at the idea that all of MAGA is just a cult. I don't believe that. You know, for all the cat turds and DC Dranos out there, you do have people pushing back at this, and for good reason. I can't see the PR endgame here for Trump to call his supporters that may have supported him over this, for the idea that he was going to be transparent with this. Weaklings and losers and idiots doing Democratic dirty work, or that it's a hoax. It's too insane to even consider.
You could take it goes on and on like that. First of all, I found it very interesting that he addressed his past supporters. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know who exactly he's thinking of there, but it is a little bit strange coming off this Turning Point USA week where, like, I don't know. I'm the only one I can think of who has been out there being like, I was a supporter, I am no longer a supporter. And not just that, but like, I went from being a supporter to you're my worst enemy. Now, to be fair to Ben Shapiro and Josh Hammer, I went from you're my worst enemy to a supporter to you're my worst enemy again. Fine, whatever. We've talked about this enough and we could get into it more. I think I was right. But it's a very strange move for any politician, even one who's in office and doesn't have to face re-election, to actually label you as their former supporters. Like, this is strange, especially for Donald Trump, who's usually pretty good at this, if nothing else. It's so strange to almost be pushing them over to the enemy side. Hey, you, this huge chunk of my base who are upset over this, I'm kind of vaguely labeling you as past supporters.
Yeah, man, I could not agree with Dave more on this. This is the greatest take to bring from this new pivot that Trump is doing, that it's almost like you're trying to shoot yourself in the foot and jeopardize the whole rest of your agenda. I just don't see the point of it. I don't see the point of basically lumping these people in with the Democrats over what is clearly a cover-up. And in fact, if I wanted to maintain the cover-up and I was smart, I think I just wouldn't talk about this right now and hope that that would do more work in keeping this a secret from the public than what Trump's doing now, actually. And that's not what I want, obviously. But if I'm a strategist in that room telling Trump how to handle this, and yeah, it's like, I want to cover up, this is like the last thing I would do. This is going to cause additional explosive tensions. And I think you're seeing them play out right now.
That is a weird reaction. And I think this really validates, maybe doesn't validate exactly what we've been saying yet, but it certainly indicates that they're feeling the same thing that me and Robbie have been saying on the show. Like, they also think this is a problem where he's losing support over this. But of course, this now, it seems like they've tried a few different angles on the Jeffrey Epstein thing. They're constantly contradicting themselves because they just don't know how to handle this. Because, you know, it's pretty obvious that they're covering up a giant intelligence operation that was a child rapist ring. And that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to write a press release for, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And both sides are implicated. I think that's why you saw silence during the Biden administration and silence during the first Trump administration and cover up now, is because too many parties are implicated in what obviously involved prominent people and the dealings of prominent people and money transfers between prominent people and sexual proclivities and potential drug use habits on prominent people. That's what Jeffrey Epstein even told a New York Times reporter in 2018. This reporter admitted this days after he died, that Epstein admitted to him that he had the dirt on politicians and their sexual preferences and their drug use habits. And I'm not saying, oh, just trust the New York Times. I'm saying that, hey, the New York Times is one of the biggest entities most likely to cover up for the regime, for the deep state, for the uniparty. And a reporter said that a few days afterward, before it became, you know, a completely politicized issue. So, yeah, I'm with Dave here. This is an obvious cover up, and there's just too many inconsistencies. These tall tales that we've told about, the client list being on Bondi's desk, and all of a sudden, no, she just meant the files, and there are thousands of hours of Epstein molesting children. Nope, that all of a sudden was porn he downloaded without just knowing those basic facts. And then you're going to hand us this stupid video that no one buys because of 3 minutes cut out of it, and it's obviously a few files stitched together that's been determined. They won't answer that. There's just too much here for us not to keep focus on it. And how Trump just was so dismissive about it right away and wants this to go away. He can't believe we're asking about Jeffrey Epstein. What are you talking about? The DOJ and FBI just released a memo saying that there's nothing there when there's clearly something there.
So first it's like, oh, we're going to get to the bottom of it. Then it's like, oh, the documents are on my desk and I just gave all the documents to these influencers. Then it was like, oh, I was tricked and those aren't actually the real documents, but there's tens of thousands of hours or thousands of hours, they said. So we got to go through all of it. Then it's, oh, none of that ever existed. There is no client list. There is no thing. This didn't happen. We're buried. He killed himself. Nothing to see here. Now the story is that it's actually a Democratic hoax, just like those other ones.
Which even that layer is another, contradiction in the former narrative where there's nothing there. He's saying essentially there are files there and they're doctored and they're part of a Democratic hoax. Well, if that was true, why would the Democrats doctor documents and try to frame Trump for within the context of the Epstein saga within those documents and then just never release them? The Biden administration did a lot of other stuff at the end of its term, like grant kind of blanket pardons to people like Hunter Biden and Anthony Fauci, but they wouldn't do this. Why? It's because that's not true. This is a farce. This is a cover-up. And again, both sides are implicated. I'm not just angry about Trump on this. I talked a lot about how Biden was pernicious in just not doing anything to reveal any information to the public, despite the outcry that people had toward transparency in this regard. And yeah, most Democrats were silent about that until now. I do think many of them are opportunistic, but I also think it's right to get to the bottom of this. I don't care who's behind it. I'll take anyone's support for this right now.
And man, do you have a big problem with that narrative. You have such a big problem with the narrative, because here's the thing. And I don't think anyone's really, well, there's been some other people who have covered it as well as me, but I've been up there with the people who have covered this really, really well for many years now. The thing is that all those things Donald Trump mentioned were Democratic hoaxes. A lot of them were Republican and Democratic hoaxes, intelligence agencies hoaxes, but no question. I mean, look, they framed Donald Trump for treason. The whole Russiagate thing was all made up. It was made up intentionally to sabotage his presidency. And as I mentioned before, explain away his victory, but really more primarily to sabotage his relationship with Vladimir Putin. Which, you call a guy, you accuse a guy of being a Putin spy. Well, now he can't really work with Vladimir Putin, can he? That was a complete hoax. Obviously, the 51 intelligence agents saying that you could view it as a continuation of the Russia hoax, but saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was that, right, these are all Democratic hoaxes. Jeffrey Epstein isn't that. And here's one very easy difference between all of those things and Jeffrey Epstein, which again, no one's going to not see this, because people aren't as stupid as you guys think they are, and we're kind of stupid, but we're not as stupid as you guys think we are. And one thing that people will notice is okay, here's the thing about Democratic hoaxes. If you turned on CNN or MSNBC, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, or you looked at NBC, ABC, CBS, the Associated Press, Reuters, if you looked at them through all of 2017, 2018, 2019, they were all talking about the Russiagate stuff. Russia, Trump, Russia collusion. This was the narrative that totally swept over it. When that debate happened at the end of 2020, all of them were talking about the 51 intelligence agencies, blah, 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 all of this. They went over it. They never stopped talking about it, pumped it out there. They used the propaganda. They buried the Jeffrey Epstein story. None of them wanted to talk about it. None of them were making any push. If this was a Democratic hoax, then they would have released it when Joe Biden was president.
Absolutely could not agree with Dave more. And when they were pretending that Trump was a Russian asset, he was actually supplying Ukraine with weapons, about $400 million worth of weapons, and, funding the Aegis missile systems that can launch dual purpose weapons, including, missiles that could be headed with an H-bomb. So it wasn't exactly even true back then, or even there was any modicum of truth to it, even back then. And what we know about it now is so much more in the area of hoax to try to take down Trump. But they didn't touch this, and Dave makes the perfect point there. They didn't even get within an arm's length of this thing, man. You've always been a conspiracy theorist to think that there's something to this that involves prominent people and blackmail and foreign intelligence services. We've always been told that. People on the populist right have always been told that. And rightly so, people on the populist right stood up and said, no, I refuse to accept this. I don't care what you call me. I just want transparency in this case. So this was driven by people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi that talked about this a lot. This wasn't the product of the Democrats in the same way Russiagate was.
But it wasn't. They were covering it up. This is not a Democrat hoax. None of the Democrats were trying to use Epstein as a political tool to hurt Republicans. When? Show me the example of it. This was never, there might be one random left-winger who points out that Trump was friends with Epstein, but that's the extent that they'd ever talk about it. They're not getting into the blackmail operation. I mean, maybe some of the anti-war leftists or something, but not the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, totally right. There were dissident leftists that, brought some of these issues up in the same way that the dissident right-wingers did and say, hey, Trump was friends with this guy from the 90s to at least the mid-2000s, and maybe there's something there and we should investigate that. There were those people, but certainly not the Democrats, certainly not crooked Hillary and Biden and Obama, who Trump's trying to blame, despite the fact it's him that's deflecting here.
Not the CIA. Is it not the, were you telling me that the CIA and the FBI and the establishments of the Democrat and Republican Party are trying to convince you that Israel set up a blackmail operation on U.S. soil that involves raping girls as they fund their war? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's happening. And this is just, anyway, this is the spot we're in. Donald Trump's got something that is impossible to sell, even for the greatest salesman. He just can't sell this.
Well said. All the polling data seems to indicate exactly what Dave Smith's saying here. Trump's having a very hard time keeping his base together on this. And it's not just activists. It's not just voters. It's like the top brass in the entire MAGA coalition. I named some of them earlier. Matt Walsh and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, have serious issues with this. Steve Bannon and how he's handling it. Some of them are willing to cross the line and, criticize Trump himself and say, hey, this is wrong. And they're not just willing to be like, oh, I'm just going to blame his subordinates. He's being controlled by, misguided forces, and it's not Trump's fault. Some of them are willing to really hand it to Trump over this, and I think rightly so. And what Dave Smith said there at the end is so true, how, much of Israeli intelligence operations going on in the context of Jeffrey Epstein and his sex trafficking ring whatsoever. No one touched it politically. The American people's memory is short, but people that actually have followed this stuff are going to be too smart to swallow this wholesale. I just don't believe they will. And of all the things that Trump has created some schisms within his base on in this term, whether it be, the big abominable bill, dragging Massey over that, dragging Elon Musk and lying and saying, hey, Elon just opposes this because he wanted EV subsidies, which he didn't, and he doesn't, and he never did, which was a lie. You had bombing Iran, which the neocons were all for. You had Levin and Shapiro out there shaking their fists and saying, yeah, regime change. And if you don't agree with it, you're anti-Trump. And, you're anti-MAGA. These were never Trump Republicans in 2016, remember? They're saying that now because they wanted that war. Well, a lot of Trump's base is non-interventionist, or generally non-interventionist, despite how much Netanyahu wanted that war. That was another source of a potential rift. Rearming Ukraine, that just came up in the midst of all this. It's kind of being, sidetracked and kind of ignored to some extent by the news cycle with dominance of the Epstein story, but that is causing a rift in Trump's base too. So out of all those things This one seems to be the most severe for Trump to deal with because it involves too many lies, too many contradictions, even from within his own administration. It'd be one thing if they stepped in, told the same tale from the beginning that, hey, nothing existed in the Epstein case. We spouted off too much about that. We looked into it and, that it just wasn't the case. But instead of that, they held like PR circuses at the White House where Pam Bondi handed out those binders that said the Epstein files phase 1 on them, which not only was a farce because it only contained documents that had already been released, but it also implied a second round, a second phase of Epstein files. So from there forward, it was just a bag of walking contradictions for this administration on this topic. And for them to go back on so many things they had said just weeks prior, like Bondi was reviewing it for release. Alina Habba out there, Trump's lawyer in New Jersey, saying, when we release this stuff, it's going to shock the world. Some of these names on this thing. That's what they sold us. So it should be no surprise Trump is losing so much support for this. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that this is a serious scandal for Trump, that it's going to affect the midterms, that it's going to affect his political future and his agenda? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Dave Smith too. He's awesome. He's done a great job covering this. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, which I'll greatly appreciate. And you can get access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.